And welcome back. So, we have all been playing a bunch of different games recently and all experiencing some different stories in video games as well. And one of the things that I think we've all sort of come to this sort of conclusion of is that a lot of the biggest games at the moment have stories in them that can only ever really be told through the narrative of video games. And that's kind of really exciting. And I'm going to be the big old nerd who has been consumed by the video game known as Elden Ring. But that is a game that has a story that could never be told in any other setting or any other format. Simply because the way it's told doesn't make sense in any other format. Like the idea of having to refer to like a separate technical manual while reading a book is hilarious to me. And I would kind of do it just like once, but at the same time, it sounds absolutely horrific. And I really like the way that they've done it in that game. I think it's really, really well done. I think out of all the Souls games, it's the most consistently interesting in terms of the way it actually drips you information.
It's just fascinating how big that narrative is, because it doesn't feel like it should be a big narrative a lot of the time. You can go for a long time playing Elden Ring and not really have any direct narrative experiences. So you're not like going through a cutscene and having somebody specifically say, la da 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 da, there's a bad monster over the hill, let's go kill it or something or other. It doesn't have that explicit narrative storytelling. And you'll run into an NPC maybe every couple of hours, during play, and they'll say 3 or 4 different lines at you, and you'll not think too much about it at the time. I guess the first interaction with a lot of these NPCs is just like, oh yeah, you're kind of there, and that's cool. But as time goes on and you'll interact with them more, or their kind of little narrative arc plays out, you start to realize that actually Elden Ring has a lot of storytelling behind it. It just doesn't seem that way, which is odd. That's something that can't really happen in other mediums, obviously, because when you sit down to read a book, every word is kind of contributing to the story. When you're watching a film, every second's contributing to the narrative. But in in Elden Ring, it feels like what initially seems like there's not that much there, it feels fairly empty, ends up being this really rich narrative experience, but it's not told through cutscenes, it's more told through a whole bunch of other means. So it's fascinating how they managed to do that. And you're right, it is something that could only happen in video games. And Elden Ring feels like it's kind of the realization of what they wanted to do as far back as Demon Souls and Dark Souls.
It finally touched the darkness inside me.
It's a much more mature storytelling process, I guess.
I've only just remembered, but is this the George R.R. Martin game?
Yes.
Well, in theory, I don't think he actually did much.
He
I haven't seen a lot of people
wrote
talking about
like
it.
item descriptions, and that was pretty much it.
Well, apparently he wrote the backstory to it, but even then, I'm pretty sure Miyazaki was like, yeah, that doesn't really work, so nah, I'm not going to do that. But you can have your name on the cover. You can, George, it's okay.
Yeah, we're going to sell as much as we can with you in it. However, you write anything and I will beat you up. Miyazaki walks into his house carrying the Guts sword from Berserk.
I'm pretty sure that's how it went. I'm pretty sure that's how it went. I don't think George actually had that much to do with it, honestly. I really don't think. I think he had maybe some lore bits involved, but yeah.
All the messages put together spell out the new Game of Thrones book.
I really love, I saw a take on Twitter, and I'm sorry to be the person who's like, oh, isn't this a funny tweet? But there's a really good take on Twitter that was like, I want to pretend that all the messages left by other players are actually just messages left by George R.R. Martin. So he's just going around writing "Try fingers butthole," like it's like out of spite instead of writing the new Game of Thrones.
That would make sense. That would actually make sense.
I love the idea of spiteful George R.R. Martin.
But
he's going to do anything to not write the book, you see. That's the real reason that he was involved with this. He's just like, hey, Miyazaki, can you like put me on the cover so it looks like I've been doing work for the last 2 years?
My guy is doing the group project effect where he's like, hey, I'll do the referencing. I'll do the referencing and I'll put it all together.
And that way he hasn't had to write the last Game of Thrones book. That's exactly what Martin's doing. So he's going to start attaching himself to other games too, whatever it takes, so he doesn't have to write this bloody.
That's the real story behind Elden Ring, is George R.R. Martin perpetually trying to stop himself from writing that book. He'll never do it. He'll never do it.
But yeah, moving on. Elden Ring's a great example, but there are other ones that we've been playing quite a lot of that are also games that would just not be possible to do in other mediums. And Harvard and I are both big time fans of 13 Sentinels, which we've been playing on the Switch release. That was an excuse to replay it for me and a chance for Harvard to play it for the first time. But that game is just so non-linear in its storytelling, the way it jumps through time and space and people and stuff, that it just wouldn't work in any other way. It had to be a video game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
'cause
was curious about Alan's comment about Elden Ring having an encyclopedia, because 13 Sentinels has an encyclopedia. Like it's got every narrative scene that you could see sequenced in this big web of interactions, and it wouldn't work in any other medium. It's like a TV show where you could watch any of the episodes in a different order of your choice.
And then it still
I like
somehow
that.
makes sense. Like, because if you watch a TV show, obviously, if you were to take a TV show and watch the last episode first, it would not make a lot of sense. But yeah, 13 Sentinels is complex, the way it's all pieced together. We've all seen films and read books and whatever where it jumps between time frames and stuff and might go back and forth through time, but 13 Sentinels does it in a very different way, which is, I can only imagine what the wall of the development studio must have looked like with post-it notes as they were trying to figure out how it all pieced together, because it's complex.
It's like that conspiracy theory meme.
Yeah, it's a kind of game where people will probably be studying how it's pieced together as a way of understanding narrative for quite some time, because I've played it through twice now and I still don't quite understand how they structured it. Like it's incredible how complex it is.
On the second time, did you play it in a different order, or did you go for your stupid Iori first method again?
No, I always went Iori first. Dude, you know
Of
me.
course you did.
You know
I
me.
shouldn't have expected better of you, Matt.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna say, like, what do you want from him? Like,
Yeah, that's it. I'm a type, you know. I've got
my guy knows what he wants.
Yeah, but maybe if he plays it last, he'll have like a different chronological order and be different. I don't know.
No,
Never seen
no,
him. Matt's
my
not the sort of man
spiteful-
who wants to have his dessert at dessert time. Matt's the sort of man who wants his dessert as the very first thing before the aperitif.
I'm a guy that likes to read like Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus and these really complex video game narratives and stuff. But also, I just want Iori.
Yeah, I love this idea of you being like, yeah, like I really appreciate the philosophical undertones, but also, yeah.
True story. I went to my anime shop for the first time in like 6 months because COVID, so I've been avoiding doing things like going out. And I was really looking forward to buying a bunch of figures. I walked back with like 4 of them. I spent $1,000 on figures, and I was still disappointed because I wanted this Iori figure, which was a quarter life-size figure that would have been huge, and it was $500, and they'd sold out. So I was very sad.
I'm pretty sure no one actually likes that character, though. Or
Iori, everyone likes Iori.
Popularity-wise, she's not like a high-ranking character.
Well, everybody's wrong.
So I remember our friend told me this in the character ranking poll. The most liked character is Ryoko, the terrifying bandage girl.
Oh, really? That doesn't surprise me. Because
what's the appeal?
Who doesn't like a psychopath?
Look, that's really the appeal.
What a
of 13
statement.
Sentinels. Everyone's crazy.
Going back to
yeah,
the original
Joker.
topic, I was going to say, is Beyond Eyes an example? Because Beyond Eyes uses graphics to limit areas and locations. So the idea is that you can't see really anything further than you, but you see like things in the distance and stuff like that for like sounds, echo. So it like shows
Beyond Eyes is the
something.
game where you play the blind person, isn't it?
Yes.
And you need to the screen kind of depicts what you see as such by actually kind of creating a visualization of what she can hear. Is that right? Like an echo.
That's correct.
Yeah,
yes.
So that's an interesting example of. I can't believe somebody brought that game up. It's been ages, but that's a good game. I do recommend you all check it out if you get a chance. But yeah, that's a good example of how I guess a video game could cause you to relate to a character and their narrative, their experience through a way that couldn't really work otherwise. Like the interactivity in that case is really the storytelling medium, and obviously interactivity is only really viable through video games. So that is a good example, I think, of
there's
a narrative
sensory quality
experience
to that.
that's and that's a good one, because I mean video games do give you a sensory experience that is different to other mediums, and when they can tie the sensory experience into the narrative, that is a interesting experience. I do like when they can do that. It's pretty difficult.
So what you're saying
everything
is
about
you
the
really
snowball
enjoy.
scene.
No, you love press F to pay your respects, right?
I was gonna say like the closest thing you get to that is like David Cage quick time event games.
Remember the time when David Cage had a quick time event for beating up a child?
What?
Yeah, with a microwave as well. That's in a game.
David Cage is a good example of somebody trying to ram other forms of storytelling into video games. Like he tries to
While not understanding any form of storytelling.
He tries to be very cinematic with his approach to games, and I must admit I do like Heavy Rain. I will always defend that, even though I think Cage is
It's the only one that's okay.
My opinion of Cage is the same as everyone else's opinion of Cage, but I do like Heavy Rain. I think that is probably the best example that he's created of taking cinematic techniques and putting them into video games. But certainly everything that Cage has done is more than possible to do in other forms. So I think he's the exact opposite example of what we're talking about here, that nothing he's done can't be done better via other mediums. Like just make a film.
The only thing I like
if you want to make
like
a film,
stuff,
just make a film. And
is
I mean,
like Death Stranding, because Death Stranding has like all the music and stuff like that being injected at various points as you're walking, and then it's like, oh, this is all wankery and cinematic. I'm like enjoying the thing. It's like when you like get like the intro of a movie, and then all of a sudden it's like time for some music to amp you up to like the actual film. That's what Death Stranding does. Like, yeah,
Well,
Yeah,
for
I'd
me-
say that Death Stranding though
For
is
me,
that's a game that would never like work as a film, because the entire point of that game is to be walking.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I mean, well, it could be an experimental like Andy Warhol film, which is 24 hours of just a dude walking. It would work as an art film. And I
just
think
drinking
that's
Monster and walking.
well, Andy Warhol did a film of 24 hours
Andy
of walking, water dripping. That was a great film.
found footage of people's vlogs or something like that,
But
and
yeah,
it
I mean,
pasted together to make a movie.
for me, Death Stranding is probably a good example of what Cage tries to do, in that he tries to apply. Kojima is successful at applying cinematic techniques to video games. You are right, Alan, that it wouldn't work as a film, but the narrative of Death Stranding would.
It would need a lot of adaptation for it to be even remotely interesting.
It would be. I mean, of course it would, because it's like an 80-hour game. To distill that down to a cinematic format would be a challenge. But the narrative itself doesn't do anything that isn't possible via literature or whatever. I've read apocalyptic books that have a similar atmosphere and stuff. So yeah, I think Death Stranding is amazing, but it's probably another example of not what we're talking about kind of in this segment. It's an open world game. So if you think of Elden Ring as an open world game that would only be possible through the video game medium, I think Death Stranding is the other end of the spectrum. So yeah, and that's not a bad thing. That's certainly not a bad thing. Sometimes you do just want a cinematic video game that's linear and enjoyable. And certainly a lot of the blockbusters, the GTAs and Red Dead Redemptions of the world, and the Call of Duties, all of those things are really just applying other genres or other media's, narrative techniques to video games to lesser or greater extent, or to lesser or greater effect. But yeah, that's definitely the common way of doing things. But the Elden Ring or 13 Sentinels approach of saying, hey, this is we're making a video game here. Let's tell a story that's only really possible through video games. That's a different thing. I think a good example, which we were talking about kind of off air, Alan, is Disco Elysium. That's another game.
Yeah,
only possible through video games, and they do that by just making you interact with the narrator. So in most other forms, if there's a narrator, you're kind of listening. It's a passive thing that a narrator's telling you something and you're tuning into what they're saying. But in Disco Elysium, you're actually interacting with the narrator, which results in an obscene amount of text in that game, but it's really great. Like, it's amazing how it's done.
Yeah, it's why I'm so nervous about this new series they're making out of it, because I'm going to watch that show and get angry that they didn't make the same choices I made.
Well, the thing is, the whole point of Disco Elysium is that choice was the point.
Yeah.
You know, it was like you were shaping this character based, the first time you play it especially. I mean, when you play it through a second time or whatever, you'll make different choices just to see how it plays out. But the first time you play Disco Elysium, you are definitely meant to make choices that match with your own kind of moral and philosophical outlook into the world. So of course, when I played it through, I ended up being absolutely communist as all hell.
Did you also get called a like a communist scumbag or something like that?
Oh God, yes, and that was within the
Because
first couple
that
of
happened a
minutes.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that was the way the developer wanted you to play it. I get the sense from Disco Elysium that the dude is pretty much a commie red, and he's written from that perspective. But you can play through in other ways, and there's what four different philosophical alignments you can end up with, I think.
Something insane like that, yeah.
It's like there's obviously the commie red, it's not a narrative arc, but you can also play through as a fascist, a
neolib, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, neolib, and I think
you play a centrist as well. It's like a centrist, something like that.
I think so. Although there might have been a libertarian approach as well. Like,
yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
God, that game is so good. If you've not played that game and you're listening to this, go play that game. It's really good. It's not banned in Australia anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's overtly political, and certain groups of the gaming community won't enjoy it for that reason. It is definitely a political, philosophical thesis that's in video game form, but it is amazing, and it is a really nuanced look at the various different perspectives on events and the different ways that different philosophical positions that you can take on politics. And again, only really possible via video games. I don't think that TV series is going to work because it's going to assume one approach, right? It's going to assume one, and that by taking the choice out, then you kind of undermine the whole point of what Disco Elysium was saying, that these things are choices and they're perspectives on events. But if you're only going to present one, then you're just undermining the whole point of what the game was about. So don't think it's going to work.
No. And that's why I'm so interested in seeing what it does.
Also, there's the fact that every kind of popular TV show is you can't do commie TV in 2022. You can't have left-wing opinions in media.
Because as we all know, the left is just as bad as the right.
I wish I could finish.
It's it's bad. Yeah, no, I'm also of the opinion that certain video games should never be made into movies. I recently watched the Sonic movie, the original Sonic movie, as in like the live action one, and I had a really good time. And I feel like the reason I had a good time was because it had basically nothing to do with Sonic the Hedgehog at all, and was its own thing. And I really appreciate that. And it's part of the reason why as well. I looked at the I recently streamed rather the infamous Sonic 06 game. And I don't think that story works in a game, and I don't think it would work in a movie either. And I think that's wonderful in its own way, because
the story doesn't work in general.
It just doesn't work, and I love that. I want things just to not work anymore. I love watching a train wreck like that because it just fills me with personal joy. So I want more games that are bad and are clearly bad and have nothing going for them because they've run out of money or budget. It's the same thing with Balan Wonderworld. Like, I love that game because it is so just like cursed and clearly unfinished. And if you've read that one series of tweets by Yuji Naka, you can see that he wanted to have a game that was finished and the story just wasn't. And it's really sad. And at the same time, because of that, I want to see what they do with it as a TV show. It's like I
Well,
want to know what
see,
they. I want
Take
to
a
know what
bad
they
game and
do.
make a bad movie out of it.
Yeah, I'm here for it.
I don't know what Yuji Naka would have done with it if he stuck with it, if he was still on the project, what it would have ended up with. I suspect I probably would have enjoyed it less. One of the things I loved about
Honestly,
Balan,
hell yeah. Make it worse.
one of the things I liked about Balan Wonderworld was that it was this fever dream of a thing that was more energy than anything kind of anything substantial. I mean, to me, it felt like
It was no substance and also no writing.
for me, it had like a Fantasia feel vibe, that it was just a series of it was just energy. It was just pure energy that was fever dream and surreal, and yeah, it was really great. I don't know if that was because it was unfinished or if it was because, I mean, if Yuji Naka had ideas to take that further. I mean, if he was going to take it further, then great. But if it was just that way because it was unfinished, then to me, just leave it unfinished, because it was good.
I mean, have you read the book?
I liked it. I liked it. There's a book.
Did you read the book? Yeah, there's a book. It's the story.
I did not know that.
Yeah, there's a whole book. It's utter shit. I read the highlights of it and like key moments because I was like, I'm interested enough to see what insane nonsense that Square was like, nah, we're not going to put that in. Because, I wanted to see. I was curious. And it's not good. It's not a good book. And it clearly reads like they were writing it. No, I read the highlights. I read the highlights and some key chapter parts because I wanted to know the story of Street Beat, who is the boy. And I forget the girl's name, but she sucks. So it doesn't matter. Everyone sucks. Yeah, that game is not good, and the story doesn't work, and the fact it doesn't work as a book is hilarious to me, and I think that the fact that it doesn't work as a video game also hilarious to me. I want to see more of it.
I would I would defend Balan Wonderworld to the end. I think that is, and I honestly think that's in the future it'll probably be rediscovered and become something of a cult. I don't think it's ever going to be mainstream popular or anything like that, but I do think that it will be rediscovered because I think those surrealistic edges of it, and just the fact that it tells such a odd story. I think I think that it'll find people that, like me, enjoy stuff that's a little bit different, and it's certainly a different game. So I think
the nicest way of saying it was bad,
no,
but I like that it was bad.
I honestly don't think it was bad in the sense of like B grade crap. I think it was just different, like very, very different. And people that go into video games expecting nice, neat, linear stories, and probably went into Balan Wonderworld expecting a nice, clean platformer of the likes of Sonic and Mario, weren't going to get that. And that's probably part of what cost it. I mean, technical issues are a different thing. It does have technical issues, and they are a problem to its detriment. But just as a concept, as a game, I think that there's an awful lot of merit to it, and I don't think it's bad at all. I just think it's different. And it's like people that will say that Pathologic is bad.
I don't think Pathologic was unintentionally designed to make you feel ill. I think they were just like, I want to make you feel ill. We're gonna do it.
Well,
they use a lack of budget for our advantage.
The point is that a lot of people, Pathologic is a very cult game because a lot of people do play it and go, this is just absolutely crap. I can't handle this. It's terrible. But it's another good example, I guess, of a game that would really struggle to be made, a narrative that would really struggle to be told in any other medium.
It wouldn't be anywhere near as impactful. Absolutely.
We've certainly had this conversation that it's one of the few games that feels genuinely theatrical rather than cinematic. Like it feels like you're watching or you're participating in an interactive piece of theater rather than film. But yeah, it's done in a way that would be very difficult to do in theater, obviously. So it's an amazing game. I think that's one that anybody who's interested in video game storytelling really needs to check out Pathologic. 2, not 1. Well,
No,
1 as
play
well, I
1.
guess.
Play 1 and be miserable, and then play 2 and be like, yeah, this is better, but I'm still miserable.
Well, you're still, I was going to say you're still going to be very miserable playing Pathologic 2. But yeah, it's a slightly better made game.